So can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. So first of all, having a look at some information on climate from the Met Office, we're having changes to our weather and changes to our climate, and this is actually being borne out already in what we see on a day-to-day, week-to-week and year-to-year basis. So we're having higher maximum temperatures, particularly in some parts of the world, such as Australia, which are experiencing large amounts of drought and record temperatures. We're having longer warm spells within the UK. Lower minimum temperatures, but fewer very cold days. So, for example, this week we haven't been having frost, we've been having sort of cloud, it's been a little bit warmer, it's been a little bit damper. Shorter dry spells and more rain on our wettest days. So again, it's been a little bit damper than usual, a lot wetter than usual, and some of us will recognise this from some of the things that have happened in Cumbria over the last couple of decades. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples that were close to home. So you may recognise this as Cockermouth, where we've had flooding on several occasions within the last couple of decades, both within the town itself, and the river on several occasions has been extremely high in addition to that. In Carlisle, we've had flooding twice, again within the last 20 years. In Workington, again, where flooding has caused bridges to be washed away. And up on the moors as well, into the North Pennines and the lakes, where there's been a number of fires in the summer months. And this has not only disrupted us personally and not only been distressing for us, but it's also disrupted healthcare. So our GP practices and our pharmacies have had to work differently. Some of them have had to move out for short periods of time and make additional things in. And if we want to keep being able to provide healthcare to our patients, then we need to really think about climate change, but also for people's homes, for their livelihoods, for their businesses as well. So this is something that's been going on. And then last year, you might remember we had COP26 in Glasgow back in October to November, where there were a lot of conversations going on around climate change and a lot of new pledges made by governments around the world as to what they were going to do. But what does it all mean practically? So you might remember this from your GCSE days, thinking about the carbon cycle and where carbon comes from, where it goes to. It's not just there in the atmosphere. It is, of course, in all of the products that we have. It's within living beings. It's from the ocean floor up to the mountain tops in the earth as well. And the biodiversity and ecology has a huge part to play in this. So it's not only the stuff that we produce, it's not only the emissions that we produce, but the biodiversity and ecology are really important as well. And again, there are groups who are looking at this. So the example on the right hand side is from CNTW, who've been doing some work around tree planting and allotments. Whales and shipping, so these are affected. There's a group called NHS Ocean who are looking at this, where whales are displaced from their habitats within the sea and also can be struck by ships who are moving around the stuff that we need. And of course, the more stuff that we have, the more shipping that we have and the more disruption that causes. And on the left-hand side, another local example, peat bog repair. So we looked at the fires that are happening on some of the moorland in our last slide. And on this one, we've now trying to repair that, trying to shore it up, trying to keep it damp, because it's a huge carbon sink. So we can store huge amounts of carbon in our peat bogs. And also in seagrass, we mentioned the bottom of the ocean. So there's work going on in southwest Scotland around repairing our ocean floor through planting of seagrass. So there's lots of things again that we can join in with personally as well as professionally around some of these things. But what about the NHS's sustainability strategy as a whole? So this is being looked after by Greener NHS. They are a part of NHS England and Improvement, but they do now sit separately. And if you see the green NHS symbol such as that, then you know it's Greener NHS who are looking at it. They're currently building in programme managers who will be overseeing the strategy across England. And ours is Dr. Claire Winter, who joined us last week as the North East and North Cumbria Senior Programme Manager. So she's starting to think about her governance and how the teams will work, how they will be assured of what's going on, and how they will support the wider work and funding. There are lots of other teams unofficially as well. So some of you might be familiar with Greener Practice, who have produced an inhaler guide, but they do have a huge amount of other things as well around practical things. There are groups for clinicians such as Pharmacy Declares and the HACC, so the Healthcare Alliance for Climate Change, and then other existing groups as well who are incorporating sustainability into their agenda. So you might have heard of carbon footprint, but what does it actually look like? So this is what a tonne of carbon looks like. It's a ball that is 10 metres in diameter, so a massive ball bigger than your house. In many cases, unless you're lucky enough to live in a very large house, I'm pretty sure that will be bigger than your house. And as we mentioned earlier, there is a huge amount of this stuff out there, and we'll be using the carbon footprint as we talk through the next few slides. So it's good just to have that picture of what it actually looks like. So the NHS's carbon footprint is aiming for net zero by 2040 across everyone who's directly employed by the NHS. So that's starting with your trusts and other people who are under direct control. And then the NHS carbon footprint plus is 2045. So that's all of the suppliers, the contractors. So medicine supplies, for example, are included in that. We talked about emissions, so there are a huge amount of emissions at the moment and a huge amount of chemicals that are used. They're used from a number of different places. So from our facilities themselves, obviously they have to produce energy in order to be heated or cooled, in order to power them. The facilities and building them, our vehicles to drive us about, our transport, and then all of the little things that we perhaps don't think about as well. So our business services who sit behind all of this and who do a lot of the back office work, how do they contribute? The medicines and prescribing that we recommend, the manufacturing, even down to things like our bed sheets for our hospitals, how can that all be manufactured and moved about sustainably? And then of course our patients as well, so we quite often ask them to travel to our services, and how do they choose to travel there, and how can we make that more sustainable for them? So there is a huge amount to go at, both clinically and in the wider non-clinical sense as well. And if we don't do it, if we do absolutely nothing, then it's going to hit the red line. So our carbon footprint, which you can see there, which is about 30,000 kilotons of carbon dioxide equivalent, that is just going to go back up again. But there are things that we can do. There are things nationally and internationally, recommendations that have been made at COP26 and previous treaties. And then there are other things that we can do around, for example, medicines, transport, and some of the other things that we've just talked about. So how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to do it through green plans. And this all comes from the Greener NHS strategy, delivering a net zero national health service, which is helping us to look at that carbon footprint and start to make suggestions about what they would like to see in the future. This came out in 2020, and then in June 2021, this was followed by another document on how to produce a green plan. So each of our hospital trusts has produced one, and that is then being fed into an ICS, a North East and North Cumbria level green plan, that will then filter back down to support some of the work that we're doing, as I've talked about before. And just to talk briefly about medicines, because obviously that's where my heart lies. So you can see on the right hand side there that we've got the 20% of medicines and chemicals, and in addition on the left hand side we've got another 5% purely for anaesthetic gases and metered dose inhalers. So that's some of the things that we're having a look at the moment. One of them is reducing our use of stuff, because of course we say first thing in the step is, can we reduce, can we reuse, can we recycle? And if we can reduce our use of stuff, in some cases we're prescribing for people unnecessarily, and there's a huge amount of it at the moment. It is a very complex situation, but how can we support people to look at different options that might be more suitable and appropriate for them? And there's a recent government document that's helping to support this piece of work. And you've noticed there that inhalers, they alone take up around 3% of the carbon footprint. So there's a new guide being released through the Greener Practice initiative that helps us to support that. And this is being supported by the Primary Care Network DES Impact and Investment Fund next year, where we're going to be having a closer look at this, which is something I know Maria's here today to start thinking about. But what specific differences can we make? Well, there are different types of inhalers. There are metered dose inhalers, and these contain a hydrofluorocarbon propellant. That took over from the CFCs. Those of you who've been with us a bit longer will remember us talking about the CFCs. We're now moving to the HFCs, and we're now looking towards the dry powder inhalers that don't contain a propellant at all. And you can see the difference there. The left-hand side is the carbon footprint of the ones that don't contain a propellant. You can see tiny bars at the bottom, and the right-hand side is if we've got combinations of different types of inhaler that contain a propellant, or if we've got combinations of inhalers that both contain a propellant, it's really high. But the good news is, within North Cumbria, this is our prescribing. We are the red line, lower is better, which we like. And you can see that we tend to prescribe more of the inhalers on the left-hand side that have a really low carbon footprint, and less of the inhalers on the right-hand side of that graph that have a higher carbon footprint. So our carbon footprint from our inhaler prescribing is one of the lowest in the country, which is an absolutely phenomenal piece of work. So we're really pleased with that. And we're also starting to promote inhaler disposal as well, so they can be returned to community pharmacies, to any community pharmacy, for high temperature incineration, and that takes them out and really disposes of them much more cleanly than if they go into landfill and general waste. So how do we do this? This is starting to move on to our thoughts for today. If we're reaching the UK's ambitions under the Paris Climate Change Agreement, actually sustainable healthcare is good healthcare, because we can save lives from improved air quality, from being more physically active with that active transport, can we walk and cycle more, and from healthier diets as well. The big challenge, obviously it's not easy. We are all shattered. We've all had a really hard time over the last couple of years. Our support for the cause versus sometimes other people staging their journey, and how we bring them along with us, how we lead them, and how we bring people along onto that journey, how we gather that support where actually people don't understand what it's all about and haven't heard this before, and also our awareness of practical ways to help. So what can I do about it as an individual, and what can I do about it as a professional? But I'm just going to finish by saying we can either let the problems weigh us down, or we can take it and run with it and create an opportunity. And it's something that people are quite often anxious about and worried about, and think, what can I actually do? But taking action, even a small individual action, will mitigate that anxiety. So just take that away. That action mitigates that anxiety and starts us on that path to progress. So that's me there with that. Thank you very much, folks.